For the last few months, I've been using this, the 360Hz QD-OLED QHD27-inch gaming monitor concurrently alongside my 480Hz 1440p W-OLED gaming monitor, which is my main daily driver. And that's mainly because, well, on paper, the 480Hz should just be better, right? Well, after swapping back and forth between the ASUS XG27ACDNG and the PG27AQDP, the former being the QD-OLED 360 and the latter being the W-OLED 480, I'm actually honestly quite surprised. Let's just focus on the XG for now. The XG is an OLED, so you get everything you expect with an OLED gaming monitor. Stunning visuals and insane gaming clarity thanks to its really fast pixel response time of basically 0.1 milliseconds, which means you get motion blur that's as low as the fastest of esports LCD panels, but you get all the other advantages of OLED. At 360Hz too, it's more than enough for really anybody to hit a high rank and get good at esports gaming. And trust me, if refresh rate mattered more than skill, I would be higher ranked than Grandmaster in Marvel Rivals right now. This means that this monitor is not just clear, it's smooth too, and is a phenomenal choice for those that play a lot of esports games, particularly FPS shooters. Now in 2025, I would definitely recommend a fast OLED panel like this, essentially every time, over any esports focused LCD panel like the Zowie XL stuff. And that's simply because, well, you get similar levels of clarity on these fast OLEDs to those esports monitors. You get far better colors, clarity, fidelity that makes these monitors far more versatile outside of esports gaming. And the better image quality also makes these esports games look a lot better, meaning better eye comfort. And honestly, you can see enemies better on monitors like this, even if all you do is grind esports FPS games. For AAA gaming, it is as brilliant as expected thanks to the fact that it's an OLED. This thing looks amazing in Cyberpunk, particularly because those deep blacks really make the neon lights of the street really pop out, and that QD OLED saturation that it's well known for is just wonderful to look at. But with AAA titles, it's unlikely you can run these games at 360 FPS or higher consistently, which likely means you're going to need to rely on variable refresh rate to compensate for your fluctuations in FPS. But variable refresh rate on this gaming monitor isn't particularly good, with noticeable VRR flicker in dark scenes mainly. And that means when there is a significant shift in whatever FPS your PC is outputting, the screen does flicker a little bit, which does get annoying and does get distracting. It does have OLED anti-flicker, but it solves it by disabling VRR, which is essentially the same as curing someone's leg pain by cutting their leg off. Not very useful at all. To be fair though, it's not an ASUS only thing, but it's not all bad, because the XG27ACDNG does have one thing that's unique going for it that none of the competitors with the same panel do, and that is ELMB, or a black frame insertion technology. To those familiar with gaming monitors, it's essentially something that's very similar to backlight strobing on LCD gaming monitors like Zowie's DIAC or NVIDIA's ULMB. But instead of turning the backlight off to hide blurry images between each fully formed frame, it shows a full black frame with all the pixels off in between each shown frame to achieve a similar effect. This essentially reduces visible motion blur by not showing your brain blurry frames, tricking it to see something clearer and crisper. But it does work. It limits your monitor to only run at 120 or 180 Hz, but it looks clearer than with it off, which is great. And that's useful in a few situations, making the slight premium this gaming monitor has over some of its identical paneled rivals possibly justifiable. For example, if you play a few easy to run esports titles that can easily be run above 360 FPS consistently, like Valorant or Counter-Strike 2, you can have this running at full at 360 Hz. But if you hop on a title that's harder to run, like Marvel Rivals running at 200 FPS, or maybe Cyberpunk or a AAA story mode game that can only run at like 120, 150 FPS consistently, then you can just turn on ELMB and set a lower refresh rate that might not be as smooth, but you won't suffer from tearing, which occurs when your refresh rate is much higher than your fluctuating FPS, but also without variable refresh rate flicker because you're not running VRR when ELMB is on. It is obviously a more niche use case. Not everybody wants to be changing their refresh rate every time they change the game, but the ELMB does make this one of the best looking 180 and 120Hz gaming monitors too in the market. As expected as well, watching content on here is phenomenal, as is editing or color grading. Peak spot brightness is a little above 400 nits, and it supports VESA HDR 400 True Black, where it can hit a peak spot brightness of almost 1000 nits, but it can hardly sustain it. So it looks great when there's a dark scene with a few bright spots, but in brighter overall scenes, it's not as riveting and stimulating. But if your room is dark, it kind of hits. Color accuracy is pretty solid out of the box, and a little calibration gets it really accurate. It has 100% sRGB coverage and over 99% DCI-P3 coverage. So basically for any web-based color sensitive work, this monitor is going to work excellently and be stunningly gorgeous while it does it. Plus, text actually looks pretty decent and pretty clear with the glossy coating and this newer gen sub-pixel layout. And I personally think that doing work on this is no issue at all. So yes, it's a brilliant high-end OLED gaming monitor, but should you get this, the 480Hz W-OLED that's about $200 more from ASUS, or one of its competitors that are a little or noticeably cheaper with the same panel. Versus its competitors, this monitor does have a justification for the higher price, and that is ELMB. But that's really its only justification. But if you're looking at this gaming monitor, you're likely someone who is looking for the ultimate 1440p gaming experience. And for the ultimate experience, it's basically between this monitor and the faster W-OLED 480Hz ASUS, which is a PG27AQDP. And yes, while the 480 is $200+ more, if you're looking for the ultimate experience, you're probably a rich dude who doesn't care too much about price. And between the two, there are four main differences. XG has a little chunkier stand that has a phone stand in it, quite cool. Not very important. Number two, the bezels are slightly thicker on the XG, so they're not as nice to look at. And number three, the PG is of course faster by 120Hz at 480Hz. Is that difference even noticeable? Well, if you're coming from a 480Hz monitor and going to 360, you can feel the difference. But if you're coming from a monitor slower than 360, so 240 or 120, you can't feel the difference. But last but not least, the most important difference between the two is that the XG looks quite a bit nicer than the PG, at least in my opinion. And that's because it's a QD OLED panel with a glossy coating. The colors on the XG just look a little punchier, a little sweeter, a little bit more saturated. The dark blacks look a little bit more dense, look contrasty, and it just ever so slightly edges above the PG in terms of just looking great. But the glossy coating has disadvantages, mainly being that it's going to handle reflections worse than a matte anti-reflective coating on the PG. It's also going to, and also because it's a QD OLED panel, it washes out more easily when bright light sources shine into the monitor than a W-OLED panel. Honestly though, both gaming monitors are phenomenal to use, and if you can get either one, you should count your lucky stars. They are great. Thanks for watching, subscribe.